I have with me now Hamilton Odunze. He's live from Boston, Massachusetts. We'll be talking about the Russian strike in Kyiv and its impact amid the Trump administration's effort to end the war with the 28 draft plan. Good to have you this weekend. Now, quickly, how does deliberately targeting civilian energy infrastructure serve Russia's longer-term war aims beyond immediate battlefield gains? And what does it signal about the willingness to weaponize basic services? You and I know that when this war started, you would think that the targets would be the Ukrainian military bases, but obviously this is targeted against civilians.
Right. So, Ligit, the strategy of targeting civilian energy infrastructure is to break down the resolve of the Ukrainian people and put pressure on Zelensky to accept conditions and end the war sooner than later. But on a deeper level, the attack underscores how much damage Putin wants to inflict on the Ukrainian people before both parties accept the peace proposal. So a few days ago, Ukrainian officials reported that Ukraine had agreed to a peace proposal with only minor details from what Russia wanted. Many of us think that the peace proposal will not work because Putin wants nothing except the takeover of Ukraine. And this attack today proves what we are thinking about it.
Or intentional destruction of a national or a nation's electrical grid be classified as a war crime under the Geneva Conventions? And what would a successful prosecution look like in an international forum? We know that Putin is committed a crime against, he's banned from the international community. So how would this work?
Well, yes, the Geneva Convention prohibits the destruction of civilian infrastructure, especially when it is indispensable to civilian survival. Attacking civilian infrastructures is illegal unless those infrastructures are directly contributing to military action. And the attack from Russia, if it is necessary, when it is, when it is proportionate to what is going on. So the kind of widespread destruction we saw today could be said to be unlawful and could be considered a grave breach and a war crime. But the problem is that the Geneva Convention faces significant difficulties in prosecuting war crimes. There is weak enforcement and state sovereignty. There is also limitation of jurisdictions and outdated, ambiguous provisions, and then the evidence gathering process is very, very challenging. So it will be very challenging to prosecute Putin under these conditions. But a successful prosecution would hold Putin accountable and mandate Russia to rebuild the civilian infrastructures that they've destroyed.
What ways does the loss of Ukrainian electricity, I'm thinking, how would it create a diplomatic lever for Moscow with European capitals that are still dependent on Russian gas and oil?
So the truth is that the loss of Ukrainian electricity will not give Russia any diplomatic leverage over most European cities for several reasons. For example, Ukraine is no longer a transit country for Russia's gas and oil. Again, they've diversified its energy supply since 2002, following the invasion of Ukraine. Europe has worked to reduce its reliance on Russian gas. Instead, it has increased its imports of liquefied natural gas from suppliers such as the United States, Norway, and Qatar. The only leverage that that Russia might have is if Ukraine were to need more energy, it could push prices up for European consumers, and that's the only leverage Russia has. And then they will begin to bargain with European countries to reduce the prices and thereby supply them energy.
Okay, makes sense. But what are the, hidden interdependencies between the physical damage to power plants and the concurrent cyber attacks on Ukraine's grid, and how might that shape future hybrid war, doctrines?
Yes, well, there's a connection between physical damage to power plants and cyber attacks. Yeah. The connection is that physical attacks on Ukraine infrastructure weaken and make Ukraine more vulnerable to subsequent cyber attacks. Cyber attacks can disrupt control systems and physical strikes, and can also destroy equipment such as transformers, The combination of both cyber attack and physical attack aims to cause larger scale and devastating and long-lasting damage. It also complicates the recovery process because after a physical attack damages the equipment, the cyber attack can further disrupt the grid's ability to restore power. The attacks are often coordinated. For instance, Russia's they call it the Sandworm hacking group, launched a cyber attack on Ukraine's power grid that coincided with a series of physical missile strikes on infrastructure. So they go hand in hand, and this is why Russia is doing what they are doing. After the physical attack, then comes the cyber attack, because they would have weakened Ukraine's ability to withhold it.
So how will large-scale prolonged blackouts influence migration patterns out of Ukraine, and what pressure does that put on neighboring EU states' asylum systems? I know that we don't know how long the blackouts is going to last for, but you cannot deny the fact that this is very impactful. Like you said, it has something to do with, cyber systems.
Well, right. The ongoing attacks on Ukraine infrastructure, especially energy and heating systems, will likely increase refugee flow during these coming winter months. The deliberate attack on critical civilian services will increase the already complicated humanitarian crisis, forcing people to seek safety elsewhere. For example, cities like Kyiv and Kharkiv will witness large-scale evacuations, right? As for the main refugee flow, it occurred in the early stages of the war. However, the recent report showed renewed smaller waves of refugees leaving Ukraine due to escalating attacks on energy infrastructure, with Germany being the primary destination for Ukrainians. Other European countries are also hosting a large numbers of Ukrainians who are coming in.
So, you and I know also that elections are just by the corner. In fact, there are several news coming in from the cabinet of Zelensky having some of his, team members resigning. But how might the power outage be exploited by Ukrainian political factions to either rally support for either line or to criticize the government's proper, preparedness? And what ripple effects could that have on the upcoming elections, like I mentioned?
Right. This is exactly what Putin is planning. This is exactly his strategy. It affects local politics in Ukraine, which is precisely why Putin is focused on destroying infrastructures. The local government struggled to meet residents' demands amid blackouts, water disruptions, and limited accommodations. But at the national level, it increases scrutiny on the central government. Allegations of corruptions are common. For example, Ukrainian energy experts have criticized the Zelensky administration for being reluctant to take unpopular steps, such as raising gas prices for fear of public backlash. The government in Kyiv becomes vulnerable due to the hardship caused by attacks, which is what Putin wants to happen. Recently, we have seen the resignation of a key Ukrainian official following the attack. But a continuous attack from Russia has, for the most part, united the Ukrainian people, which is why the war has lasted to this point.
So one more thing before we let you go. If the international community fails to impose meaningful consequences for this scale of civilian infrastructure damage, I'm wondering what precedent does it set for future conflicts where essential services become legitimate targets?
Yes, it says, it sets global precedents. For example, we've seen that China is gearing up to invade Ukraine. To invade Taiwan. So these are precedents that have been set by the Russian attack on Ukraine, and we're going to see more of those, and hopefully the world, will continue to see those kind of attacks on, countries trying to take over, and this geopolitical re-strategizing, and that's what we're going to see going forward, unless something happens and begin to realign the global politics.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Hamilton Odunze. He is international affairs analyst, joined us to talk about Russia's attack in Kyiv, leaving over 600,000 civilians scrapping for power.